Welcome back everyone. Today, we're continuing with the next part of this series, called What If Goku Remembered the Saiyans? My name is Ash. Please, for me, drop a like and subscribe to the page. Also leave your comments down below. With that, let's begin. Bardock slouched at his desk, arms folded and half listening, as Miss Hamilton scribbled something about symbolism on the board. His dark eyes tracked the chalk, like it might suddenly attack. Honestly, he'd rather take a key blast to the chest than sit through another minute of this. The hum of the classroom lights, the rustle of paper, and the occasional drone of someone sneezing made it even harder to focus. To him, English class was like trying to fight blindfolded underwater. Slow, frustrating, and kind of pointless. This whole day had been dragging. Sure, it started out all right. He'd woken up before sunrise, muscles aching from yesterday's session, and jumped right into a sparring match with his father. For most people, a 15-minute bout would leave them lying on the floor, gasping for breath. For them, it was just a warm-up. By the time they wrapped up, an hour and a half had already passed. Bardock, dripping sweat and laughing, had zipped into the house, rinsed off in a 10-second shower, and blinked away to Orange Star City using instant transmission. He was almost late again. Almost. But managed to slip into class just before the bell. Now, here he was, stuck in a seat, watching the hands on the clock, like they were deliberately slowing down just to mess with him. A tiny paper triangle hit him square in the back of the head. Bardock blinked, straightened, and reached down to pick it up off the floor. He unfolded it, and in slightly messy handwriting, it read, "Wanna go to the mall after school?" He smirked. Glancing back, he caught sight of Arasa sitting a few rows behind him, flashing him a hopeful smile. Her bright blonde hair bounced as she gave a little shrug, like she was saying, "Why not?" Bardock grabbed his pen and scribbled back, "Sure," then flicked the note over his shoulder like a dart. She caught it with a soft laugh. "Hey," he thought, leaning back in his chair. A little fun wouldn't kill me. He knew it meant cutting into training time, but even warriors needed to relax sometimes. The day crawled along until it finally hit last period, gym. Now this was more his style. Bardock stood in the locker room, cinching a heavy gravity belt around his waist with a satisfying click. He wore a sleek black gi, its fabric rugged and weighted, the kind built for real combat. Underneath, a forest green undershirt clung to his torso, and matching green wristbands wrapped his forearms. Black boots completed the look. It was a twist on his father's usual colors, his own way of stepping out of that shadow and forging his own path as a fighter. "You look the part," came a voice nearby. Bardock glanced over to see Sharpener tightening his own gloves. The school jock wore black pants and a white tank top, his arms flexing like he expected someone to clap every time he moved. His blonde hair gleamed like he polished it with ego. Bardock raised an eyebrow. "Some of us are real fighters," he said coolly, brushing past him. Sharpener huffed, but didn't say anything back. The two stepped out into the gymnasium, wide open, polished floors, mats rolled out across one side, and padded walls for safety, or at least attempted safety. Bardock could already tell there'd be holes in the drywall by the time this class was done. "Good afternoon, class." The voice was calm, but firm. One Bardock recognized instantly. He turned sharply. Standing at the front of the room was his uncle, Raditz. Raditz wore a deep black gi that mirrored Bardock's, but his lacked any undershirt or wristbands. His massive arms were bare, corded with muscle and battle scars. His wild mane of hair, usually untamed, was tied neatly into a thick ponytail that reached down past his waist. Beside him, tall as a mountain and twice as intimidating, was Broly. The legendary sign's eyes were unreadable. He stood silent, his breathing slow and measured, the air around him somehow heavier, almost vibrating with latent power. He wore the same style of gi as Raditz, but it clung tighter to his massive frame. "My name is Raditz," he said, hands behind his back, "and I'll be your self-defense instructor for the rest of the year. Assisting me will be my teacher's assistant, Broly." There was a moment of stunned silence in the room. Then, Sharpener snorted, "Lame." A few of the other students chuckled nervously. Raditz slowly turned his head to look at Sharpener. His face was perfectly calm, but Bardock knew that expression, like a wolf smiling before it pounced. "Oh?" Raditz said, arching a brow. "It sounds like you believe we have nothing to teach you. Is that the case? Or am I mistaken?" "No offense," Sharpener said, trying to sound polite, but smugness dripping off every word. But I trained at the great Hercules Satan's dojo, you know, the world champion. I doubt there's much your assistant can show me. Broly didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Raditz, however, chuckled. I beg to differ, but I'm a sporting man. So I'll offer you a deal. Land a single punch on Broly, just one, and I'll give you a guaranteed pass for the entire class. That caught everyone's attention. But if you can't, Raditz continued, voice sharp as a blade, then you'll sit down, shut your mouth, and let us teach you. Sharpener grinned like he'd already won. Deal. He stepped onto the mat and cracked his knuckles confidently. Broly stepped forward, moving like a boulder come to life, and took his place across from him. He didn't raise his fists, didn't move at all. He just stood there. Sharpener looked confused for a split second, then forced a cocky smile. What, not gonna fight back? Gonna make this easy for me, huh? Raditz raised his hand. Rules are simple. If Sharpener lands one clean punch before he's knocked unconscious or forced off the mat, he wins. Ready? Sharpener dropped into his stance, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Broly didn't even blink. Begin! Sharpener launched forward, every muscle in his body firing like a spring-loaded trap. His fist shot straight toward Broly's head with all the confidence in the world. But Broly didn't flinch. At the very last second, the towering sign simply leaned his head to the side. Sharpener's punch missed by a hair, sliding harmlessly past his cheek like wind brushing a mountain. The jock blinked. Huh? Before he could process it, he instinctively spun, sending a wide, sweeping kick at Broly's legs, aiming to knock the giant off his feet. Broly didn't block. He leapt. Sharpener's eyes widened as Broly soared clean over his head like a shadow. Then, wham! A massive heel slammed down on the back of Sharpener's head. The blow wasn't full force, but it was enough to send him stumbling forward like a ragdoll, crashing hard onto the mat. He grunted in pain, rolling once, but managed to get back to his feet with a shaky breath. He wasn't done yet. Okay, Sharpener muttered, more serious now. Lucky shot. He charged again, this time smarter. He feinted a step to the right, fooling even a few of the onlookers, then whipped into a rising uppercut aimed at Broly's chin. But again, Broly just tilted his head. The punch tore through air. Then Broly's fist came down. Boom! It landed square in Sharpener's gut, like a hammer slamming into steel. The shockwave rattled through the entire gym. The jock's breath exploded from his lungs. His knees buckled. He dropped to the mat, arms wrapped around his stomach, gasping. Broly didn't even break stride. He reached down with one hand, grabbed Sharpener by the collar, and, with all the ceremony of tossing out garbage, hurled him off the mat. Crash. The poor guy landed in a heap, groaning. Videl had been watching quietly the whole time, arms crossed, her eyes narrowed, studying every inch of Broly's form. No stance, no defense, just pure, effortless dominance. That was real control. Sharpener wasn't weak. Sure, she could beat him without too much trouble, but Broly annihilated him. She raised an eyebrow. Okay, she thought, maybe this class won't be such a waste after all. Across the room, Bardock laughed out loud as Sharpener hit the ground. Serves him right, he muttered, folding his arms with a grin. Mouth wrote a check his fists couldn't cash. Raditz stepped forward and offered Sharpener a hand. Are you ready to follow instructions now? The jock looked up, wheezing a little as he grabbed Raditz's arm. Yeah, he coughed. Can you teach me how to do that? The rest of the self-defense class? Boring, at least to Bardock. Raditz had them all going through basic stances, posture correction, and slow, repetitive drills. Stuff Bardock had mastered when he was still learning how to walk. He stayed quiet, respectful, but his mind wandered, back to sparring with his dad this morning, to flying over the city skyline, to the upcoming weekend tournament. So when the final bell rang, he stood up fast, like the sound of freedom itself had hit his ears. He was halfway down the steps when, "Hey, wait up!" He turned around. Arasa jogged toward him, her long golden hair bouncing with each step. Bardock smiled. Yeah? What's up? You weren't gonna ditch me, were you? She asked with a mock pout, sliding up beside him and casually grabbing his arm. Her hand felt warm, soft. Bardock blinked at it for a moment, unsure how to react, but the corner of his mouth tugged into a smile. Okay, he thought, I could get used to this. So, what are we doing at the mall? He asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Shopping, of course, Arasa answered, eyes twinkling. Bardak's face went pale instantly. His brain flashed back to the horrors of going shopping with his mom and Chi-Chi, hours of holding bags, standing outside dressing rooms, and pretending he cared about shoes. Arasa giggled. Relax, I'm kidding. I know better than to drag a guy to a fashion show on a first hangout. Bardock let out a relieved breath. I figured we'd get something to eat, she said. Maybe catch a movie or something. Now that sounded good. Bardock's eyes lit up. Food? Yeah, that sounds great. Deep beneath Capsule Corp, where the walls hummed with layers of reinforced shielding and advanced tech, Broly walked alone through the prison wing. His heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Around him, cold lights flickered over thick metal doors and glowing force fields. The air was sterile, quiet. Today had been interesting. At first, when Raditz suggested they teach self-defense to a bunch of weak Earth kids, Broly had rolled his eyes. He wasn't exactly a people person, but to his surprise, it had been kind of fun, watching arrogant humans get humbled in seconds. And he needed the money. If he was going to live peacefully on this planet, he had to find a way to survive in their world. Raditz's plan, training humans, opening fighting schools, even teaching at public schools, seemed like a good enough path. Not perfect, but practical, and fighting was still fighting, no matter the audience. He stopped in front of a cell near the far end of the wing. Inside, behind a thick red force field, sat a man who looked older, worn, and bitter. Paragus, his father. The older sign glared from inside, his wrists bound in glowing energy-nullifying bands. Stripped of power, trapped like a shadow of his former self. Broly said nothing at first. Then Paragus growled, voice full of contempt. What do you want, traitor? Father, Broly said, his voice low, calm, but heavy with something deeper, hope. He stood just outside the glowing red barrier, arms folded, his large shadow cast long across the metallic floor. I want what I always want. I want you to let go of your hatred, so you can live a normal life. Paragus stood slowly from the bench in his cell, the energy-dampening cuffs around his wrists humming faintly. His face twisted in bitterness. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, now looked worn and tired, but still burning with anger. Can't you see, my boy? He rasped. They've brainwashed you. They couldn't destroy you, so they did the next best thing. They tamed you. Turned you against me. Broly shook his head slowly. No, he said. They could have destroyed me, and maybe once they would have, but they didn't. They helped me. They healed me. They gave me peace. No! Paragus roared, slamming his fist against the force field, which flared bright red in response. They turned you into their pet. I raised a warrior, a king, and now look at you. Broly didn't flinch. He didn't argue either. He just turned and began to walk away. There was no reaching his father tonight, not when he got like this. The fury always clouded him, made him unreachable. No matter how strong Broly had become, no punch could beat that kind of darkness out of someone. Maybe someday, but not now. Bardock leaned back in his chair at the food court, arms stretched, a wide grin on his face as he patted his full stomach. That was good, he said, sighing like he'd just come down from a high. Arasa laughed and shook her head. I still don't know how you eat that much, she said with a teasing smile. Bardock sat up straight and smirked. That was nothing. I'll probably eat again when I get home. They stood up and started walking, the bright lights of the mall reflecting off the smooth tile floors. Bardock had never spent this much time in a mall before, at least not without a fight breaking out. And surprisingly, he didn't mind it. Then, Arasa reached over and gently slipped her hand into his. He blinked, looking down for a second, her fingers wrapped easily around his. Her touch was light, but the feeling hit him harder than a punch. They kept walking like that. No words needed. Just two teens moving through the crowd, laughing at random things, peeking into stores, talking about movies and food and life. Time passed like wind over clouds. Later, outside the mall, as the sun began to set, Arasa leaned her head toward him. Will you walk me home? She asked softly. Nah, Bardock said. Her smile faded. Her grip on his hand loosened just a bit. She looked disappointed, but Bardock smirked. How about I fly you home? Arasa blinked, then smiled wide with a breath of relief. Sure, she said, laughing. Bardock landed gently in the front yard of Arasa's house, the grass rustling beneath their feet. He lowered her down slowly, making sure she was balanced before letting go. Wow, Arasa said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as she looked up at the sky. I'm not sure I'll ever get used to that. She turned to face him again, her smile warm and playful. Thanks for the good time, cutie. Don't mention it, Bardock replied. Their eyes met, and something in that quiet moment held them in place. There were no explosions, no shouting, no battles, just stillness. He leaned in. She stood on tiptoe. Their lips met, softly, hesitantly. Their very first kiss. The kind of kiss that leaves your chest thumping and your thoughts tangled. When they pulled apart, both were a little breathless. So, Arasa whispered, eyes sparkling, does this mean we're dating?
Bardock grinned. Sure, he said. I could get used to this.
The moment Bardock walked out of Arasa's yard, he exploded into a golden aura, electricity cracking around his body. He shot into the air as a Super Saiyan 2, trailing streaks of power behind him like a comet. He could have used instant transmission to get home, but he didn't want to. Not tonight.
He wanted to feel the wind on his face, the power in his blood, the thrill of flying across the sky like he was the king of the world.
Within minutes, he touched down on the grassy lawn in front of Capsule Corp in West City, his boots hitting the ground with a dull thud.
Kakarot stepped out from the front porch, folding his arms and smiling. How was school?
Bardock couldn't hold back the grin spreading across his face. It was good, he said, trying to sound casual. Kakarot chuckled. I know that look. Who is she? No one, Bardock said quickly, a little too fast.
Kakarot raised an eyebrow. Do I have to beat it out of you?
You can try, Bardock shot back, smirking. And that's it for today's episode, guys. If you watched to the end, then that could be an indication that you enjoy the series. So please leave a like on the video. Thank you and take care.